What's up, everyone? This is Anthony Pompliano. Most of you know me as Pomp. You're listening to Off the Chain, simply the best podcast in crypto. Let's kick this thing off. Mike Novogratz is the founder and CEO of Galaxy Digital. In this conversation, we talk about his time at Goldman Sachs and Fortress, how he lost billionaire status and what that meant, criminal justice system and bail reform, his thoughts on privacy and surveillance, and what he believes the future of crypto looks like. I really enjoyed this conversation, and Mike is one of the most thoughtful people in the space. I hope you enjoy this conversation as well. I'm sure a lot of you have used Kayak to find the best flight. Totle's kind of like Kayak, but it don't find you no flights. It helps you find liquidity on decentralized exchanges, and it optimally routes your trades for execution. So Kayak, you find flights. Totle, they help you find liquidity. We should get Kayak on for this spot that I'm providing them, but Totle instead is our advertiser, and you should go visit totle.com/pomp. Again, that's totle.com/pomp, and let them know that I sent you. Tell them you love their product. Take a screenshot, tweet it at me. I'll drop you some fire emojis, and then we'll all be happy. So totle.com/pomp. Boom, another ad. As many of you know, crypto investors store their digital assets on exchanges or in cold storage for long-term safekeeping. However, this strategy doesn't help them grow their investment holdings or build overall wealth. With the new BlockFi interest account, users can now securely store their Bitcoin or Ether at BlockFi and receive 6% annual interest paid monthly in cryptocurrency. 6% is an absurdly high rate. It's the best rate in the industry. I highly suggest you go check out blockfi.com/pomp. Again, that's blockfi.com/pomp to sign up and start earning crypto today. Zen Ledgers for all you accountants and crypto investors out there trying to get through this bear market. They're a fast and simple tax reporting tool that saves you a ton of time and headache. Ain't nobody like dealing with their taxes, so let Zen Ledger do it for you. You can learn more by visiting zenledger.io/offthechain to get your taxes done with ease. And as an Off the Chain listener, you'll get 20% off your 2018 tax forms. That's right. Listening to this podcast makes you smarter and saves you money. One more time, zenledger.io/offthechain. Go check it out.
Anthony Pompliano is a partner at Morgan Creek Digital. All opinions expressed by Pomp or his guests on this podcast are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Morgan Creek Digital or Morgan Creek Capital Management. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Pomp as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only as an expression of his opinion. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
All right, guys, I'm here with Mike Novogratz. You are a legend at this point, I think, in both Wall Street and crypto. I really appreciate you coming in and doing this.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah. Everyone knows, I think, a lot of the Wall Street background, but maybe let's go pre-Wall Street. You grew up in Virginia and then wrestled at Princeton.
I did. I did ROTC.
So you did that in college?
I did it in college. You know, back then it was a way to pay for college, and I grew up in a military family, and so you didn't even think you were joining the Army. You just thought you were a way to pay for college.
Yep.
And I wanted to go to Princeton because Brooke Shields went there, and that seemed like a cool place to go. Plus, Tom Cruise went there in Risky Business, and so it was kind of the school of the moment.
Yep.
And not many, kids from my area were going there, and so I afforded it by doing ROTC, and then woke up one day and I was like, "Damn, I'm in the Army."
Yep.
I became a helicopter pilot in Fort Rucker, Alabama. It was a great year, one of the favorite years of my life, quite frankly. Learned the South, met a lot of friends. Didn't really want to spend 8 years in the Army, and there was a track to join the National Guard. Mm-hmm. Reagan had put too many people in the Army at that point, and his surge to build up our defenses, he overdid it. And so they were like, anyone want to volunteer to be in the Guard? And my hand was up. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, because I really didn't think we were ever going to be used in war again. I mean, one of the great misjudgments of my life, there was glasnost and perestroika, and even in the Army, they were always talking about tank warfare. And, when we're fighting the bear, the Fulda Gap, the whole Army was set to fight this ground war in Germany. With the Russians invading. And I was like, dude, you guys don't read the paper. And so I was so smug, and I was like, I'm joining the Guard. I don't want to practice and never be used. And literally, my best friend from flight school, I think he was in combat for about 25 straight years.
Wow. Yeah.
When you think about it, we invaded First, we went down to Panama and got Noriega, and then you had Desert Storm 1, and you had Bosnia, and you had the second Gulf War, Afghanistan. I mean,
look, if you're a kid in America today and you're 17, 18 years old, you've lived your entire life with the U.S. at war in the Middle East.
Yeah, and so my generation of officers and enlisted men have really spent the bulk of their career, if they stayed in the Army, in and around combat. Yeah. And I was convinced we would never go.
All right. So what, I want to talk a little bit about Princeton wrestling. I played football at Bucknell, and I'm assuming it's somewhat of a similar experience, but the idea of participating in a combat sport where there's a team aspect to it, but really when you get on the mat, it's you versus the opponent, right? What is that like, or what kind of lessons you learned there that you think help on the investing side or some of the other things you've done in your career?
Listen, wrestling is a sport probably bar none that teaches toughness, toughness and discipline. And so, you get the crap beat out of you. And so it teaches toughness, discipline, and resilience. You got to get back up and go back to, you're not going to win every match. And so I kind of think it's the grit and toughness is what you take into the investing world. Also discipline. You can't just be a good wrestler. You're a good wrestler because you practice. You can't be a good athlete in anything. I mean, Michael Jordan shot more basketballs than just about anybody. Tiger Woods swung more golf clubs. And so the great athletes, it's push-ups, it's running, it's drilling, and it's that practice that builds a discipline that shows up when you're in competition.
Yeah, it's the actual work that you put into it.
100%.
What I see you tweeting all the time on Twitter about the UFC and some of these guys who are going. I've been actually pretty shocked that there hasn't been pressure or conversation about that becoming a collegiate sport, right? Just given how combative it is and popular it is now in the US.
It's interesting. So I have been a big advocate for both high school and college wrestling and Olympic wrestling. It's been a big part of my philanthropy and a lot of my energy. And when UFC first showed up, I was really kind of anti-UFC because it's like there's something noble about wrestling, even the rules. Like I can pick you up, but I'm responsible for putting you back to the mat. And USC felt just too thuggy. It felt like too barbaric, almost like freaking dogfighting. And remember, the original UFC, there were less rules than there are today.
I was gonna say they put gloves on them, right? You couldn't kick people when they're down anymore.
And we really had to be careful when we were getting wrestling into New York City schools, and we're now in, I think, almost 200 different schools that my group Beat the Streets has slowly. When we started, there were 25 schools that had wrestling. We had to really differentiate ourselves from UFC and say, no, it's not this violent sport. Listen, UFC has become more mainstream. Lots of my friends are participants. I mean, actually, 3 of the champs right now are guys that are my wrestling guys.
Really?
Cormier is a great friend of mine. Ben Askren's a buddy. Henry Cejudo is like my little brother.
That's awesome.
And so for me, it's been fun to watch them. And but it took me a long time to kind of come around to UFC.
Yeah. What do you think about Conor McGregor? He seems to have everyone's attention.
Conor, I sat front row at that Khabib fight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was fun. And matter of fact, when he jumped over, we thought he was jumping right at us. I was like, and he is probably the most charismatic athlete since Muhammad Ali in terms of pure charisma. Now, he's not a quarter of the man, a tenth of the man Ali was. I mean, Ali was a poet and a real social warrior, and McGregor just seems to be a fun guy that's, a bit full of himself. But man, does he have charisma. Yeah. I don't think, listen, he's not going to have a great UFC career from here. The wrestlers are going to continue to dominate UFC. They just are. In a fight when look what Ben Askren did in that last fight. I mean, he was literally getting destroyed and stayed in it. Next thing, he choked the guy out. And so,
it just seems too like when a wrestler is an elite wrestler and they get their hands on somebody, get them on the mat, it's game over. Right? Yeah. All right. So you're in the National Guard helicopter pilot, and all of a sudden you join Goldman and you go to Asia. Describe kind of like why go to Goldman and then why take the job in Asia versus do something else.
After I left the Guard, I thought I'd go to DC and join politics. And
oh, really?
I did. I love politics. I love policy. And I interviewed with lots of jobs and just nothing paid anything. And I had spent so much money at college. I owed my friends money. I had student loans. I always liked to live a big life. And, those jobs just didn't pay a thing. And so a lot of the guys that got the entry-level jobs either had wealthy parents, which I didn't, or or really were more committed than I was. And so I came to New York, and lots of my friends, they had started 2 years earlier working on Wall Street, and Princeton Wall Street is a pretty big connection. And I ran into a buddy of mine who got me an interview at Goldman, and 24 interviews later, they gave me a job, and it felt like as good a place as any to work.
Yeah.
And so I had a 11-year career there, first in sales, then in risk taking. Loved it. Goldman is a cult.
I was going to ask about the interview process and how that leads into the culture.
Listen, it's like playing for the New York Yankees if you're a baseball player. And so once you're in the process, you think, I want to be on the New York Yankees. It's a wonderful firm. They've got a really strong culture. What makes it wonderful is they hire the best and the brightest. And so they continue to get great human capital. They had this partnership gig. They still do a version of it, which keeps you there because you start defining yourself on, God, if I'm going to be a partner or not. And so you get paid less than you would if you worked at somewhere else because you had that chance of the golden ring.
Yep.
I was lucky enough to be in the kind of right seat at the right time and do well enough that I became a partner. And to this day, it's a very cool fraternity. They have a Goldman Sachs retired partners dinner every year. And it's shocking how everyone from around the world that was a partner comes back just for that dinner.
Really?
There's a real tie to that sense of excellence and sense of greatness that Goldman has been for a long period of time.
It's funny to hear this because I think that the military has similar, kind of tie-in. You know what people went through to be there, thrive there, et cetera. I think that some of these tech companies today, right, that really blew up and there were small teams that eventually built multi-billion-dollar companies. And Goldman, I think still today focuses on the best, the brightest. And now what they're even doing is they're going after new types of people. Like they've got this program where they go get military veterans, right? I think they get a lot of NCAA athletes. And
so I think great companies and great institutions create extended family. Princeton is a really neat place. It's actually, people are more excited about Princeton after they graduate than when they're there. It's hard when they're there.
Yeah.
And so you create this sense of family. Goldman has done the same thing. Being a retired Goldman partner, there's a synergy. If I do well, it makes Goldman look good. If they do well, it makes me look good. And so, they reach out to their ex partners and keep us engaged.
Absolutely.
As does Princeton, as do great companies or great nonprofits. And so it's this idea of you can create identity. Like we're all searching for some identity, especially, listen, when you see religion breaking down more and more, people want to feel community. And your job is a place where there's community.
Yeah, it's one of your identities for sure. What was it like working at a Wall Street firm in Asia in the 90s?
So interesting, Asia 94 to 2000, I always thought they were like dog years. Like you worked, 1997 felt like 7 years. You had this unbelievable exuberance of free markets and China exploding north in terms of, capitalism just spreading through China. It was a little bit like the Wild West. At times I felt as a market participant an unfair advantage in that, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Barclays and Barings, these were institutions that taught you how to take risk and think about risk and understand finance. And often we were competing against, let's say in the Thai crises, against a group of risk takers and traders that didn't have the education that we did.
Yep.
And so it almost felt unfair.
Yep.
And we did very well. And so.
You think it's still like that? Or you think it's the talent has really evened out?
I think the talent is evening out. Listen, China does not let in U.S. financial institutions because they still don't want to compete. And I remember sitting with Zhu Rongji, who was really the architect in a lot of ways of China's great miracle, or at least the second half of it. He was like, listen, we'll let in Kodak because we'll be able to figure out what they do real fast and then we'll be able to beat them. Yep. We're not letting in Goldman Sachs. We're not letting in JP Morgan, not for a long time. And they still haven't. Like they were supposed to have.
Yep.
And it's one of these reasons we have this trade tension now. But partly because the jobs of risk and finance are a little more subtle than they are, say, in manufacturing. They're getting there. Listen, I don't like competing against the Chinese. You look in our industry, I think the most influential guy in the whole industry right now is CZ and what they're doing at Binance. He's running at 100,000 miles an hour. Now, he doesn't have the same regulatory oversight that the rest of us are. He's kind of playing the game of catch me if you can. But he is a, unbelievably dynamic entrepreneur.
When we interviewed him on here, I'd spent some time with him before and was really able to help unpack why and how he's built it. And the part that's crazy to me is it's one thing to go from no revenue to a lot of revenue if you're a high growth company in a big space and kind of you ride the trend and you benefit from it. He's also built a team of 400 people in 18 months, right? Like, and they're in like 40 different countries. They communicate all through technology, and just it's incredible to scale and stay somewhat efficient and move at that speed with also hiring 400 people in 40 different countries, right?
So when you look back on the last 3-4 years, the most profitable parts of this industry from a business perspective, so it was profitable if you bought a bunch of Bitcoin or Ethereum and it went up and you sold it. Okay, that was great. But in terms of building a business was, can you connect into the gambling culture, right? The single best business out there right now is Arthur Hayes. It's just a freaking money printing machine. But both Binance, BitMEX, Bitfinex, they all connected into this love of Asian gambling. You can call it investing. It's speculating. It is this surge.
Trading, speculating, whatever it is.
And that, being able to profit on that and, with that enthusiasm of what we had as kind of the speculative bubble, literally gave these guys war chests to now grow out other businesses. And so it'll be interesting to see. I don't think in the long run, those margins will be sustainable, right? It's barriers to entry aren't high enough. And so I think the exchange business will come down some. But those are the guys that have the capital to invest in new things and hire 400 people. And, if you took the institutional route, it's been a much slower route.
For sure. Well, and I think the big question is what's more sustainable over 10, 15 years, right?
I think we'll see a big transition in this industry in the next, 6 months to 6 years. Both businesses are quite valid. I think right now there's almost been very little institutional business. And so there's a lot of work being done building the architecture to allow institutions. And the architecture is not just custody and trading and regulatory architecture. It's also educational architecture. It's educating the pension funds and the asset managers on how the system works and why it's important.
Louder.
Oh, louder. That's happening. And it's happening not as fast as I'd like. If I've made, off predictions in the last, 12 months, it's always been thinking something would start and then it's 4 months later than it's going to be. But I'm wildly confident that it's happening because I see it every day.
Well, and part of it too, I think that's really interesting. So, Before we get into the institutional side, one other thing I want to cover is you left Goldman and went to Fortress, right?
Yep.
And when you went to Fortress, you were there when they took the company public, right? There was kind of a big financial windfall event for a lot of people involved. Just walk through, what was it like going from Goldman to something that was newer, younger, and kind of earlier in its life cycle? And then what the parallels are that you see to today with crypto?
Well, sure. So I remember sitting around a table. Fortress existed. It was a small company. Wes Edens had founded it. And him and Pete Brigger sat around a table. And both Wes and I had the exact same idea that 1 + 1 + 1 could equal 8. That was just simple, that we could create a alternative asset manager and have businesses that had very little to do with each other than they were alternative asset managers, and put them together and create synergy. And we set out. We literally drew the business plan on a napkin. Our first contract was on a napkin. We kind of used the Goldman theory of true partnership. And so each of our businesses, we threw 100% of the profits into the pot and then split it up, which in some ways was insane because we had so little to do with each other. Wes ran a private equity business, and at that point he was just killing it. Pete Brigger was building a lending, specialty lending business, and he was just starting. And I ran a macro business. But we did it that way. We had great success the first 4 or 5 years and took the company public, in some ways right at the right time and right at the wrong time. I mean, we were rock stars for a month. It was the longest time between a stock and a stock opening on the New York Stock Exchange in 15 years. And, we were, 50 times oversubscribed in our IPO. And,
wow.
And so that was exciting. Unfortunately, we ran right into the jaws of the 2008 financial crises. And quite frankly, having built a business as fast as we did, and the headiness of going from, a wealthy guy to a billionaire to and having everybody call you and all that goes with it, we stumbled in '08, or, between the various businesses. I used to kid around about like the three pigs. One was built of bricks, one was built of sticks, and one was built of straw. And, some did better than others.
For sure.
But it was humbling. There were lessons learned. And I think the big lesson that is relevant to crypto is it's hard to build a business that fast. And because you have the two different forces. It's hard if you're the most sober, a woke person on the planet. But when you're going from Arthur Hayes having been fired from Citibank to now the richest kid walking around in Hong Kong, it's hard for it not to impact your judgment, your ego, and it usually takes some lumps and some stumbling for you to kind of regain your balance. And so people are going to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes because they think they're untouchable when things happen as fast.
And it's not so much even just humbling when you're building a business in general, right? Forget the personal aspects of it. The business is going to go through good times and bad times, and weathering that.
It's really hard to build a business. Make no bones about it. If I've learned one thing in Galaxy, having this as my third shot going through this stuff, is it's hard to hire the right people. It's hard to get customers signed on. It's like everything is a little harder than you hope it would be.
Absolutely. All right. So you go through the Fortress time, and then I think everyone pretty much knows when you first started looking at crypto, got excited about it, et cetera. What was it like, though, to go from being a billionaire to not a billionaire to back to being a billionaire? There's only a couple of people in the world who have done that
3 times.
Right? Listen, I was going to say, you've done it at least 3, right?
A lot of it's just psychological. Once we got very rich, I never was not really rich. And so it's unfair, if you're worth $600 million or $800 million or $1 billion, in lots of ways, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're going to give less to philanthropy in lots of ways.
Yep.
You can't buy a sports team. But there's nothing in your life or your ability to do new things that changes. It was a lot of fun, and it was empowering to have caught the Bitcoin Ethereum rally and to have believed in it. And, it's also, there was a lot of luck involved. If Joe Lubin was my college roommate, and if I didn't stumble into his office in Bushwick when Ether was trading at 96 cents, I'd have made a whole lot less money.
Yep, absolutely.
I just would have. I get credit, I think, because I bought a lot and I held it for a long time, and most people would have sold it, and we traded it well. But it was a lot easier when the money didn't matter as much.
Absolutely.
I had other both intellectual pursuits going on, business pursuits going on, and financial pursuits.
It's almost a sense of one of the things that holds a lot of people back is fear, right? And when you don't have a lot, you actually make decisions that if you have less fear or you have more freedom, you're empowered to make those decisions. And that's actually where the risk reward is kind of plays in your favor.
Yeah, fear is really interesting because it's necessary, right? If me and you are walking across a balance beam between these two buildings, 46 floors up, we should be scared because you fall, you die.
Yep.
And so fear is a helpful thing at times. Where it's unhelpful is when it's an imaginary dragon and your body locks into, and often it's your ego, right? It's, oh God, what are people to think about me if I don't? And that's a completely unhealthy fear. And so I once had a shrink who was yelling at me because he was like, dude, you're not scared of all the things you should be scared about. Like you shouldn't ride a motorcycle 125 miles an hour when you're not a really great motorcycle rider. Like that's just stupid.
Yep.
You should be scared. And you really shouldn't be scared of taking risk in life and failing.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, back to the drawing board.
Well, it's funny that you say this because I saw you tweeted kind of the top 5 daredevils basically, and Alex Hunnam, the guy who scaled the Big Rock in the documentary that I recently watched, he has no kind of initiation of, I think it's the amygdala or whatever.
Yeah, he has a smaller amygdala than others. That apparently comes from practice.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe it's genetic, maybe it's from practice. And so he gets less scared. I don't know, that documentary, I met him and was just in awe.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like the part that actually I didn't know about the story is he started to climb, was like, no, I'm not feeling it today, got down, and then just came back one day and said to everyone, tomorrow, just meet me out there.
6 months later.
Just crazy.
Talking to, I'm not a giant climber, but I have a place in Jackson Hole, and a lot of the great adventure people migrate to Jackson. It's an amazing mountain. And talking to other great climbers and adventure people, lots of them think, no one will ever do that again. Like, no one.
Yep.
Like, that's a once in a, not generational. It's like once in a humanity thing that he literally climbed that thing with no rope.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. All right, let's get into some of the crypto stuff. Galaxy, you guys got a whole bunch of stuff going on. Let's talk a little bit about the asset management stuff. Is pretty self-explanatory. You guys manage money, you invest it. You guys got some balance sheet stuff. You're making. So
we have 4 businesses, if you want to think about it, and we set out to be a credentializer in the space. I used to talk about Drexel Burnham because I think Milken really helped credentialize, high yield and junk bonds, and they became a real part of the financial armory of of all companies. And I think at one point, crypto won't replace. We're not going to have a whole new world, but it's going to supplement. It's going to be part of the payment system of the world. We're going to have security tokens. Crypto and blockchain are going to be integrated into lots of both the consumer side of our world and the financial side of our world. And we want to be part of that process. And so that's the core, reason to exist. We have a direct investing business. We invest off our balance sheet and on behalf of one other investor in the venture space, in credit, in new businesses in venture, in gaming, in new protocols, and in wallets. And so that's been the most exciting space because you're sitting with people and you're like, hey, this is the new. And what's coming down the pipe. Absolutely. And having never done that before until the last few years is by far the most enjoyable part of the business for me. And quite frankly, the hardest because it's a learning curve of trying to understand what'll work and what won't work.
You almost feel like you're getting told the secrets, right? That's what I always find. Like, these are the smartest people in the world, and they're going to show up and they're going to tell you everything that they know, and they're going to tell you everything that they think is going to happen. And then you have to decide whether you believe them and they can do it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's incredible to have those people show up to want to talk to you and tell you all this stuff.
It's fun. It's a whole lot of fun. And that's really the juice of this revolution that's going on. There's a trading business that we're setting up, and we're in the process of, getting good at. The tokens from Bitcoin and Ethereum to all the tokens, need to get bought and sold and stored and lent. And I think that part of the infrastructure is still not as built out as it needs to be across our space. A lot of these companies who are good at it slap their technology together, and it's complicated stuff. You can't buy it off the shelf. We've tried many a times. And so, there's a race going on there to provide liquidity and lending services and custody. I think that's going to be a continuing growing part of the business because I see, forget the coins we already have, there are new ones coming. We know Telegram's got a coin coming. JP Morgan's got a coin coming. Facebook has talked about a coin coming. These coins need to be traded and stored. And so there's a big opportunity, I think, to continue to invest in infrastructure. And so
how do you see the Wall Street banks? So the funniest word to me in this entire space is institutions, right? Because I think people who come from more of a Wall Street background, when they think of institutions, they think of the JP Morgans, the banks, the financial institutions. And then people who come from a less Wall Street, but still asset management, they're thinking of endowments, pensions, sovereign wealth, et cetera. The Wall Street institutions, what's the general sentiment there, right? We saw Citi go to build a coin. They've backed away. JP Morgan's now going to build one. Like how do they all look at this?
So they have a monster business. And why take risk on something that's really small until they're convinced it's going to be real? And so they're getting closer. I know Goldman, for instance, is gearing up around securities tokens. They're not doing anything yet, but they are getting really ready for and looking at all the questions on where would you store them? Do you have to build your own custody? Can you use someone else's custody? How are they going to work? Listen, the regulatory framework isn't there yet in security tokens. We're working really hard on that, on our security token business, and we've got, I think, some cool things in the hopper.
Do you think that that's something that you're not only excited about, but will be just as big as kind of the tokens, ICOs, all of that? Or do you
it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot bigger and a lot less sexy.
Yep.
So think about something. One of the projects we've been looking at is tokenizing a triple net lease portfolio, which is a bunch of leases from a Midwest real estate company, maybe yield 7.5%. Like, what crypto investor wants to buy a 7.5%? None.
The only 7 they're looking for is a 7X.
But there are plenty of investors in the world that would be thrilled with a stable 7%, and they're buying them now. And so in some ways, the tokenization of that asset is going to do is it's going to be, at least in the short run, a call on liquidity, and then maybe in the long run, some liquidity. In the short run, you're going to distribute it to probably the same exact people that would have bought it anyway. But in the long run, maybe we'll get to the point where you could crowd sale distribute. And transferability will be easier because you'll have that built into the token. And so it's a marginal increase in the product. There's a $2.5 trillion to $3 trillion a year private placement market. And so each year, basically, there's $2 trillion of new public equity and $2.5 to $3 trillion of private. Some portion of that private is going to get tokenized. And so if you're any one of the major banks and you're like, hold on, I was part of that, and now if I don't get into the token business, I'm not going to be. They're all going to be part of the security token world. Yeah. Again, it's not as radical in lots of ways as changing the payment network or creating peer-to-peer systems. But it's going to happen.
And part of it too just feels like all they're going to do is they're really just switching out the underlying technology. It'll make some efficiency gains.
It's a new wrapper.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a big, big business.
Well, and I think a lot of people in crypto forget how large, real estate is, or the credit business in traditional markets, right? I mean, these things, I said to somebody the other day, I said, look, money is like 85 trillion or so, give it, globally. Real estate's like 215 trillion. So literally real estate as a market cap or addressable market is just at least 2 times bigger. And so this stuff is going to happen at some point. I think the big question, right, and I think your articulation of like 6 months to 6 years, right, is, it's really hard to tell on the timing of this stuff.
Listen, there's architecture that we're an investor in Templum, right? They've done a great job of trying to get all the regulatory framework so you can actually, buy a security token, list it there. But even how that world plays out, where are these things going to get traded? That question's still open, right? Because none of them are being traded, or very few.
For sure.
And so I also worry, like if I'm in that trying to create the exchange, there's just no way that the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange and all the big vested interests are going to, if we really do have a big surge in security tokens, are going to say, oh, let those new guys take all the business.
Of course.
Right? So the legacy players are doing their homework and they're coming in. And I think one of the biggest things I've noticed in the last year is, their capital to the space has slowed down some, but the venture business, there's still plenty of capital coming in. If you actually added the capital being spent by legacy, that's why more people are getting hired in crypto than used to be.
Yep.
Because each of these places is working on their piece of it.
Well, and it's more natural, right? I think a large Wall Street institution is much better set up to go into security tokens than, hey, there's this new thing that may replace the US dollar. Right, that the radical aspects of this are just on the fringe, and there's everything from the regulatory standpoint to it's just they don't have that type of talent today, right?
When I think of Galaxy, there are like kind of 3 buckets. One is I'll put the Bitcoin bucket, but really are we going to have, and I think we will, a market for what money is? Bitcoin versus the dollar versus some algorithmic coin versus
whatever it is.
Money is really a social contract. Right? Bitcoin is worth something because we say it's worth something. If me and you took the exact same technology and put it out there and said, hey, it's Novo coin, and nobody cared about it, it's worth 0.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin's worth whatever it's worth today, $80 billion or $70 billion.
70, I think, yeah.
Because the social contract, we've decided that I'll trust and enough people have decided that they trust in it, that it's worth something. And so I think part of, and maybe the coolest aspect, is we're going through this experiment that we are going to have a market for money. That's kind of one. Second bucket is really this idea of a Web 3.0. And the third bucket is really this tokenization, digitalization of stuff. And so they're different stories. They're connected, but they're not the same stories. And so we kind of break up our thinking of the business and attacking each one of them.
What is, let's switch gears a little bit. And I know that you've been talking a lot about surveillance in China and some of the stuff that's going on there. What's your thoughts on kind of just, again, technology is permeating a society and the questions around how it's being used and by who? What's your thoughts there?
So privacy is a giant issue in the world. I had a conversation with Lloyd Blankfein about this, and Lloyd's one of the smartest guys I think I've ever met. And he's a lot of fun to have a conversation with. And he was like, Novogratz, you're wrong. We've already lost it. It's just gone. And so deal with it. And I was like, that was just too depressing. I haven't agreed with that yet.
And he's saying, just to be clear, he's saying that we've already lost privacy.
Right? And so like, we're going to, the new generation is just going to learn to live with a non-private world. It scares me, the social responsibility score that China is, there were 30 million people last year that were not allowed to travel in China, let alone out of China, because of their social responsibility score. Right. So it's not like a theoretical thing. It's happening. And when you look at the growth of AI and how good AI is getting at understanding people's behavior, and you have data, all of their data basically being shoved into, a government-owned database, all their spending data, it's a really scary thought. And listen, I looked at a company that I'm debating to invest in that takes a picture of you and instantly shows me all the pictures that match your face on the web and your name. And so I never can remember anybody's name. Like this guy, I forgot his name already. I take the picture and I get his name, I get his bio. That's scary enough. Imagine in 5 years when you've got a bot that can race through every last database that you can sneak your way into and find every last picture of him. And next thing you know, we find a picture of him going into an illicit place, or quite frankly, going down the street and interviewing with somebody else. And so it's like, I fundamentally believe we have a right to privacy. And I don't know how you stop it. I mean, there's lots of ideas, with the blockchain being able to help.
Well, what about Facebook? And, they've run into a lot of these issues, and now they're starting to talk about, do they decentralize some of the products? Do they maybe give you as the user a little bit more control? Like, how do you think a company that, again, very similar to the banks, they've got a huge business and it's working, but there's a lot of concerns and, people are saying, hey, what's around the corner?
I think it'll be one of the most fascinating things to watch over the next 6 months to, again, a few years on how legacy companies who are under attack because of their privacy respond. Bold ones will respond boldly and others won't. And I
think that the bold response is needed?
I think the bold response would help. I think, this is going to be attacked two ways. Companies themselves are going to realize I better change or I'm going to lose some consumers, but governments are going to, Europe is much tougher on privacy than we are. And you're going to see governments regulate these guys. You can already hear it. There are just too many breaks. I mean, this, and one of the most scary parts of the technology that all our smart friends have created, you think about this New Zealand video that went viral of some jackass coming in and shooting up all these innocent people. And, Facebook has all the vested interests of the world not to let it go viral. They worked as well as they could and they got it down as fast as they could, but it's still a zillion people saw it.
I think the number they said was in the first 24 hours took down 1.5 million copies of the video.
There you go.
Crazy.
Think of that in a peer-to-peer censorless system. Like that ain't good. Like, so should media even be on the systems? They're real ethical questions to ask.
Well, and the trade-off that you're talking about here is, so all of a sudden there's this video that gets streamed live. There's no centralized party to take it down, right? In that case, it's bad. The counter argument is in China, you have people who want to get words out, and so they put it on the Ethereum blockchain. right?
Yes.
Good and bad, same system.
100%. And so it's really complicated and it's really nuanced, and it's going to take a lot of smart minds to try to figure out, right? The pure libertarians are devil be damned. And there are 45 million images of kiddie porn out on the dark web and on the web.
Crazy.
So do you know what kiddie porn is when people say kiddie porn?
No.
It's pre-verbal. That's 3 year and under. Like, I don't want those images in any society being available to anybody. And so it's really an interesting debate on where privacy and how you do it. And so, again, I wish I was smart enough to know the answer. I'm fascinated with the subject. There are some things that are simple. I don't want my DNA going to 23andMe, even though I liked that stupid stick years ago. I would rather that be between, encrypted into a kind of a blockchain database, and companies being able to pay to get it, to use that data. That seems like the simplest architecture, and I don't think people would disagree with that. Yeah. The porn world, you can have your own moral decision. 18 and over, okay, maybe, but when you're talking 3 years and under, people that have no agency, I don't think anybody on the planet would say that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and part of it too is you have to layer on then the regulation piece of this, right? In some countries, there's much more lax rules than not. And I think a lot about when you go onto the internet, a lot of times it acts as a single country, right? The laws that apply in kind of the physical world, sometimes they're hard, right? If if you go and visit a website, if it's on a server in the US versus Canada versus China, sometimes there's impact, sometimes there's not, right? And that really just makes things more complex. I want to talk a little bit about kind of criminal justice, and I know that you're really passionate about kind of this bail reform and stuff. So I don't think a lot of people understand some of the problems, and maybe just articulate, the 2 or 3 things that you kind of think are the most screwed up, and then we can talk about why they are the way they are, and kind of some of the solutions.
Sure. So one of the great windfalls for me of having bought Ethereum cheap, and when I sold a bunch and wanted to buy some fun things for myself, to make myself feel less guilty, decided to give an equal amount to charity or to a nonprofit. And
you split it. You did 50-50.
Well,
or close.
A little,
generally.
Yeah, roughly. And so I got behind a group called the Bail Project. And so I heard the story once, and that's all you needed to hear. So here's the story. Tonight in America, 450 to 500,000 people will go to bed in a jail cell, a dangerous, stinky, unpleasant cell, having been arrested but not convicted of a crime, solely because they can't afford bail.
So they've been arrested. They're put in a jail cell. They're told you can get out if you have X dollars.
Yes.
If you don't have X dollars, you have to stay here.
Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan yesterday was talking about the two Americas, and he said, listen, 40% of America can't afford $300 or $400. 60% of America can't, or 50% of America can't afford like $1,000. Bail gets set at $600, $800. Not only most people can't afford it, they don't even have a friend they can call. And bail bondsmen don't work on those low-level bails. And so they stay in jail. Now, if you're in jail, you are 7 times more likely to plead guilty.
Really?
Because you want to go home. You're going to lose your job. You don't get to see your kids. It's in a dangerous environment. And so you plead guilty, usually for time served, and now you've got a record and it's really hard to get a job. If we bail you out, 50% of the time the DA drops the charges. 97% of people that get arrested never actually go to court.
Wow.
It's all plead out. And so it's this completely screwed up system based on, do you have the money to pay bail?
And in that project, what they basically have, I think it's like a revolving bail fund.
So we raised a whole bunch of money now, and we are setting up in 25 cities to literally show up at jail and pay people's bail. It's a humanitarian, really direct service. Getting someone out of jail helps. 40% of all prison rape happens the first 5 days you're in jail. 40% of all prison death happens in the first 5 days you're in jail, right? So jail is 1 year and under, and prison is 1 year and over. And so jails are dangerous. Go out to Rikers. It fucking scares the shit out of you.
Absolutely.
Or go to the ship up in Brooklyn. And so I plunged into that, and it was this unfairness thing that just touched on something. And since then, I spent a whole lot of time. I've got a team that has looked at the whole arc of criminal justice from pretrial to probation and parole. I teamed up with Meek Mill and Jay-Z, which was kind of cool, on probation parole. There are 4.5 million people stuck in this idiotic system of probation and parole, where you might be there for 12 years, 15 years. Meek's still on probation. He came to play a concert in New York City last week. He's got to get permission
to go
for a crime that they already realized he didn't even do.
Yeah.
But he's still stuck in the freaking system.
Well, the stat that I heard, and I'm going to forget exactly what it was, but there was some high percentage probability that if you go for your parole hearing, so you're in jail, you're possibly allowed to leave, and the judge is going to make a decision. And the people who go within like the hour and a half before lunch get denied parole at a much higher rate than people early in the morning.
I read that once.
And so, again,
this is their life, right?
Yeah. And the part that I've always you wrap your head around. So if I'm a judge, I'm sitting there and somebody comes in and we convict them of whether it's drugs, crime, whatever it is. And then they say, okay, you have to sentence them. I can say 6 years or 7 years. Doesn't really sound like that big of a difference. It's 12 months of somebody's life they're going to go sit in jail, right? And so there's a huge...
Yeah. There was a big outroar when Paul Manafort got 4 years only. And I was like, you know what? 4 years is a long frickin' time. Plus they're taking $28 million he's got to pay back. Plus he won't be able to work and he's humiliated. That's probably a fair sentence. What's unfair are these crazy long sentences we give people for a little crap. And so we're thinking about it all wrong. We need to change. One of the things we did this year, we took 38 people to Germany. We took the heads of the bureaus of prison from Louisiana, South Carolina, North Carolina, Michigan, Connecticut. We teamed up with Vera Justice, who have been doing this work for 75 years, and toured the German and Norwegian prison system. And to start with, same crime, 1/3 the sentence. So our sentences are 3 times longer.
Okay.
But the big difference is they look at the entire system from a completely different lens. So the moment you get sentenced, post that, you lose some liberty. Everything else is about your rehabilitation. How can I make you a productive member of society again? And so you're treated like a human. And our system is about degradation, debasement. The moment you get arrested, you're treated like an animal. I mean, I've been to 7 jails now in the last year and a half. You walk through jails like you're shitting right in public, guys are masturbating. I mean, you start treating people like animals, they act like animals. Yep. And there is nothing about rehabilitation and moving forward. There's a mean-spiritedness, there's a punishment side that our whole system seizes on. When I walked through the German jails, the US jails, and the Norwegian, and I was just going to give them a grade, Germany would be a 90 out of 100, and Norway would be a 99 out of 100. The US is like a 12.
Really?
I mean, it's barbaric. Up until February of this year, if you were a woman giving birth in a federal prison, you were shackled, hands and feet to the gurney. Shackled. In 13 states today, you're still shackled as a woman giving birth in prison.
It's incredible.
It's freaking barbaric. And it serves no purpose.
What do you think about the death penalty?
I think we should do away with the death penalty for a lot of reasons. One is that there's so many people that, unfortunately, they make a mistake. That poor indigent people, especially in the South, that haven't been provided the good defense. There's emotions around crimes that show up where DAs and jurors could be.
It's like a mob mentality.
It cost us a whole lot of money. I even think these crazy, triple life sentences. We have 10,000 people in New York state prisons right now that are over 55 that have already served 15 years. The chance of them committing another crime, if you all let them out, is about 0. That's just statistics. So we're paying all this money to keep them in because, they killed someone at one point in their life.
18, 25. Yeah.
What I've learned in this 18 months I've dove in is usually between 15 and 20 years in jail, something changes in somebody. They take complete ownership of what they've done, and they've changed. Matter of fact, I had two guys who had committed murder in my house last week, and I left them with my kids with 0 worries. Unbelievable decent humans. And so you have to ask yourself in our whole system, do you believe people can change? If you don't, you got a different criminal justice system. I fundamentally believe you're not your worst moment in life. Partly because I've had a lot of shitty moments myself, and I refuse to believe that's who I am.
Yeah. You've got a number of kids. What's their take on crypto, or what have you done with them in terms of technology and crypto?
My kids used to get asked at school all the time once I started being public, and they were like, "Yeah, my dad's got enough for all of us."
That's epic. Because what, they're like late teenagers, early 20s?
No, I've got a 24-year-old who's working in the movie business, and a 23-year-old who's teaching for Teach for America in Chicago, and I've got a 21-year-old who's still at school, an English major, and I got a 16-year-old who's a sweet kid here in the city.
Which one gives you the hardest time?
Yeah, my 21-year-old.
That was a good time in life. What so one thing that you've also said, going back to the crypto stuff, every fund should own some Bitcoin, right? Not just crypto funds, in terms of macro hedge funds, etc. Explain a little bit more. I agree with you, and we talk a lot about it with institutions, but why the funds, and kind of what's the benefit there?
Listen, Bitcoin is a kind of, if you step back and how cool, 10 and a half years ago, we have this experiment, this social experiment. We've got a technology that allows us to create this sovereign money, really. We've never had sovereign money outside of a sovereign. And it's worked. $70 billion market cap 10 years later is staggering. And so someone should bow down and, rub Satoshi's toes and thank him. Bitcoin, in my mind, has taken this place of hard money, or gold has been hard money. So I keep thinking of it like gold as store of value. It's clear to me that there's architecture being put in place to allow easier and easier adoption and access of it. And so at its base, just as a digital store of value in a world where most money gets inflated away at a pretty high rate, the euro's 20 years old and looks like there's arguments that it could blow up. It might not. There's a huge vested interest to hold it together, but man, oh man, half of Wall Street thinks the euro's toast.
Average currency is 27 years old.
And so, Bitcoin provides a really interesting alternative to gold. Forget the other stuff that might come out of it. Forget level 2 solutions and payments and everything else. Just at its core, sovereignty should be expensive. People bitch about Bitcoin's expensive, and I don't think it's that expensive. I actually, wired, from my bread wallet, $10,000 worth of Bitcoin to someone a week ago, and it cost like 6 cents. Seems pretty damn cheap to me. And so I think the macro case for it is pretty strong. And so if you're going to put a couple percent of your portfolio in, there's a decent chance, it catches wind. We still, Fidelity's just getting set up. Back continues to get delayed a little bit, but it's not going to get delayed forever. They're going to be in the game, and there's lots of other players coming.
It sounds like what you're doing is you're making kind of a qualitative look. The reasons why this works, check out, right? So they're legitimate reasons why people want this asset. And then also you're making a kind of non-correlated asymmetric return, supply demand type argument that just look, if demand increases, the price is going to go up.
Gold's got a $8 trillion market cap, or $7.5 trillion market cap. And so we're 100 times off on that. And we're not going to get there in Bitcoin in the next year or two, but over a 20-year period, could that happen? Easily. And that's giving zero optionality to all the other stuff.
Of course.
And so I think seems like a pretty smart portfolio bet.
I want to make sure I get this right. You sit on the advisory committee of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, or at some point you did?
I did for 3 or 4 years.
What do organizations like that think of crypto, blockchain, like just knowing how they think and meet and stuff like that?
So I remember going to visit the Fed in 2014, maybe, with Dan Moorhead. I took me and Dan, because I was on the committee, I called him. I said, I want to come talk about Bitcoin. And to be fair, they were really interested, and they were well-versed even then. And their view was, it'll never be a currency because fixed supply currencies just don't work. They're too easily squeezed, manipulated, but maybe as a payment system. And they love the blockchain concept. And not payment system, maybe as the blockchain as a ledger. They love that technology they were fascinated with, and maybe as a store of value. It just isn't nearly big enough or to reach their level of importance, right? We have a $20 trillion economy. And so I literally talked to one of the Fed governors 2 weeks ago and about stablecoins. And he's like, no big deal.
Yeah.
Talk to me. They probably should worry about it more than they do, but it's just not on their radar.
Yeah. If it grows in size, they'll start paying attention, but it's just not there yet.
The problem is by the time they start paying attention, it'll be too late for them to do much about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before you came, I tweeted and asked what questions people had. And the most popular question by engagement was for you to tell a story of the most extreme, fun, or savage thing that you've done in your life. And so I said, I'll ask him. I don't know how far he'll go, but what story would you tell? It's just kind of this is Mike Novogratz at his best.
When I've told the story about it. When I left Goldman Sachs, it wasn't a graceful exit, and I took a year to kind of sort my shit out. And you're depressed at that point. You're trying to get yourself feeling better. And me and two friends we went to the Sahara and we did this race called the Marathon of the Sands.
Okay.
It's a marathon a day for 6 days across the Sahara. And running. And so you're running in 135, 140 degree heat, and then it freezes at night. You got to carry your own food. They give you 6 liters of water a day. And it was an amazing, life-fulfilling, it's just, you're like, what am I fucking whining about? Like, I'm in the middle of a gorgeous desert. I'm running with 600 cool people from around the world. My feet hurt. You just felt alive again. Yeah. And so when we finished it, I had literally no skin on my feet. Like all the Europeans, they'd get a blister. They'd quit the race. Like, but are you quitting? They're like, I got a blister. I got to quit. And I was like, you're a goddamn wimp. And so I literally finished with almost no skin on my feet. I came home in a wheelchair. But it kind of reaffirmed like toughness and life and like stop whining.
Yeah.
And I literally soon after that, started Fortress or, joined Fortress and moved on to the next chapter.
It is events like that, I think, are very they're a reset button, right? Yeah. Anytime you kind of go through an event in your life, if you just go, I know people have gone and done endurance races. People have just disappeared. Actually, you went to India for like a month, right around the Bitcoin Ethereum stuff.
I did India for many times for long periods. Again, I have this thesis that we're all screwed up. Like, and our parents screw us up no matter how they try. And so your number one mission in life is to sort your shit out. And there are lots of ways to do it. Mm-hmm. Heck, I went to a 1 week healing center in Costa Rica 2 weeks ago on an ayahuasca journey, which that might be the most radical thing I've ever done in my life.
Explain a little bit about what that is.
It's a plant-based medicine that purges shit in your body that you don't need and gives you a real therapeutic insight to yourself. You literally have a conversation with yourself like you've never had. And you're like, you think you're talking to someone else. You're like, it's just me. And so it's therapy without the therapist. It's had, people there for all kinds of different reasons, for healing trauma, for healing pain, or for just learning about themselves. Mm-hmm. It's not for the faint of heart. But I try to do one thing a year where I learn about myself. Mm-hmm. And so that my second mission is then try to walk each other home and try to help out your community, however you want to define that. Mm-hmm. If it's charitable, if it's being nice to your cranky brother, if it's being a good employee. But like we all have capacity to help each other out. And so the more you sort your shit out, the easier it is to help other people out.
Yeah. Well, and look, one of the things that, before we started recording, we were talking about is, I recently was looking at all the drug statistics and crime, right? And so, it's like 1.3 million Americans every year get arrested for like simple possession of weed, right? And 22 states have now decriminalized this stuff. And I think from your standpoint, it's okay, look, the laws are screwed up. And at this point, everyone knows we got to fix this stuff, right? But there's also an element of you can use all sorts of different therapies, whether they're drug-based or not, to help better understand yourself, better understand what you want to do in life, etc.
To be fair, I think a lot of drugs are not good for you at all, right? Mm-hmm. Like the world would be better off if there was no cocaine. It just would be better off. The world would be better off if there was no heroin. Mm-hmm. And so by no means do I want to advocate for those use. There are some drugs or plants that really do have a purpose.
For sure.
And from a criminal justice perspective, most of this should be in health and mental health, and throwing people in jail for being addicted to anything just it's counterintuitive to them and ever becoming a productive member of society. And so I think we should decriminalize all drugs. And it's a radical statement because I just said there are a lot of drugs that are really bad, like bath salts, no real purpose in this planet. Like, we'd be better off without bath salts. Lots of drugs we'd be better off without. And so, it's a complicated issue, but like putting people in jail because they're a heroin addict doesn't really help them not become a heroin addict. Helping people deal with their trauma that led them to become an addict, that's where we need to get society to look at.
It goes back to your whole point about the criminal reform system, right? The jails, et cetera, should be driven by rehabilitation, not by pure punishment.
Yes.
Right. And the more that you can focus on that, the better the outcome is.
100%.
Yeah, I actually agree with that a lot. Last thing for you, CBOE recently announced that the Bitcoin futures they're going to kind of revisit, et cetera. I think a lot of people are yelling and screaming on the internet about this is really bad. Look, no one wants this stuff. I take the view that it's probably not the first product that institutions want to participate in. Where are you on this, and how do you think it affects the industry?
Listen, I think liquidity is always good for your space. I mean, the reality is the CME kicked their butts. Yeah. And, these guys have limited resource on where they're going to spend their focus, and they decided to spend it elsewhere. Finding leverage in Bitcoin is going to get easier as the architecture of the space gets better, right? You're already seeing the lending market around Bitcoin went from 10% to like 3%. So now once you can borrow, you can short. And so now it's not so hard to short Bitcoin. It used to be almost impossible to short Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
Right, in 2006. Don't know how to do it. And so as the lending markets of all these coins get built up, and then all of a sudden firms like us will start giving people leverage once we've understand the customer well enough. And so, it wasn't great, but it's not critical. Again, you look at Arthur's business over in wherever it's based these days, gives you unbelievable amounts of leverage. I don't love the way that, as a user, I would be very careful.
He's given 50 times leverage on Ethereum and 100 on Bitcoin or something. He's a fascinating guy to me.
I once met him, and I was going to be mad at the guy. And by the end, I was like, "Can I buy a piece of your business?" He was like, "Absolutely not." I was like, "Please." Listen, he's built a great business. He's smart. He's tight. There are businesses that are living outside of what we would consider the regulatory sandbox. And, it's another thing that's going to be interesting to watch over the next few years. Like, I can't build a business like that. Based in New York, I pay my tax. You can, there are, Binance is living outside of that regulatory sandbox. BitMEX, there's plenty of them.
Yeah. And some are openly violating regulation, and then some are saying, I'm just going to go to the places where it's the most lax.
100%.
Right?
100%.
There's two very different approaches.
100%. And listen, I think that's all going to play out. The last thing I'd say is I'm more confident today on the space than I was 6 months ago. And even a year ago, because I think you're going to see in the next short period of time a few announcements that wake people up, and they're going to look back and say, wait a minute, this is no longer a fringe thing. Like, it might not be taking a huge amount of commerce right now in the consumer or the financial space, but the commitments that legacy players and crypto players are going to make in the next 6 to 12 months, the whole world's going to wake up and they're going to say, oh, this is real. I got to get involved. And so the decision process around, is this a real thing or not? Does the technology work? Will it work? Do we even need crypto? What's the use case? Those questions are going to fall away much quicker than people think. And all of a sudden you're like, And so I don't know when it's going to happen. I have a sense there'll be some big announcements. It's one of the cool things of being in a seat that sees lots of projects and talks to lots of both institutions and companies. But I think both on the consumer side and the financial side, the change is coming. And again, if I'm wrong by some timing, but I'm more confident that I'm not wrong, that you're going to see this, and there'll be a step function where people are like, okay, crypto's a real thing. Because a lot of people still don't believe crypto's a real thing.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that from afar I've always appreciated about you, and there's, I don't know, a handful of other 6-7 people who come from very traditional financial backgrounds, is it always seems like you've had this belief in the inevitability of the assets, right? Like, of course this is going to happen. When does it happen? At what scale? Which asset is the one that, kind of takes the lead? All of these different things are to be determined. But of course this is real. Of course this is going to persist. And of course it's going to grow over time, right? Like, to your point, there's a lot of people who don't believe that stuff, right? Like, they're still actually questioning, like, is crypto as an asset class and as an industry going to go away completely in the next 5 years?
Right.
Like, there's people who believe that.
And I think sometime in the next year, a lot of those skeptics are going to be like, okay, I give up. And they're going to not do that just because it's more of the same old thing. I think you're going to see some projects announced that are of scale, that get people thinking. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. So JP Morgan, the second largest bank in America, is now trying to get involved. Look, that's a centralized coin. It's not really the same DNA of our spirit, of the spirit of the community. But when you see more distributed systems, even if they're not decentralized, decentralized, distributed, it's a nuanced word. I think you're going to see a kind of a mindset shift.
Look, I give the bankers a harder time than anybody else, right? With the whole long Bitcoin, short the bankers, et cetera. But if you take the JP Morgan coin, for example, it's actually incredibly intelligent. It's forward thinking. And if you're in their seat, that's probably the best thing for them to do, right? Is to go and say, look, we're going to use this internally. We're going to kind of control the risk. We're going to use it for ourselves and maybe a couple of clients. And if it works, then we can branch out from there. But it makes sense for their business to do that.
And one step cooler would have been the 40 biggest banks having right, instead of just JP Morgan running the one node, having a distributed 40 big banks having a coin, and wouldn't have been as good for JP, but it would have been, then also you would have been like, wait a minute.
The banker coin.
Banker coin.
All right, before we finish up, I usually do rapid fire questions. You don't have to answer rapid fire though. What's the most important company in crypto other than Galaxy?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. Listen, in a lot of ways, Coinbase has been the most important US-based company in terms of connecting to the end user.
Yeah. Really driving adoption.
Consensus has been a really important company in terms of, creating this Ethereum ecosystem. They were in our office last week. They gave a presentation. It was A+. Block One is interesting that they've, the EOS blockchain they kicked out. They have a huge war chest. They've hired a ton of smart people, and they've got a lot of cool things. You wait come June, July, you're going to see announcements that I think are going to be exciting in that space. And we're still early enough in this space. There's a layer of sovereignty when I think of Bitcoin that is slow and expensive, kind of thick value where you would feel comfortable transferring big value. You can take some time to transfer big value. EOS has taken this universe of very fast transaction speed, and so more transactions, less value. And so we've been investing in lots of gaming companies that are building on top of it. It makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah. And so how this whole Web 3.0 plays out is still really early. We just had Cosmos come out, and so, but I think these companies that are investing lots in the developers and the developing communities are the essential companies in a lot of ways. Yeah. For the space.
What's the one regulation that
Binance? You got to give Binance. He's dominating right now, and in recreating the energy of, and I don't know in the long run it's fun and it's exciting. I don't know if in the long run you'll see all these new deals that are getting done through his distribution product. My sense is they're going to go up and they're going to go down, and if that happens, people are going to fade again. Like rerunning the 2016-17 playbook isn't smart for the whole space. It was a frenzy. It was a speculative bubble. It was fun.
Have you ever seen anything like that before?
No. I've not. I've been in bubbles before, but
Yeah.
I remember looking at the chart of Bitcoin when it went from 12 to 20, and I was like, I've never seen a chart on a log chart go parabolic, and it did. And we kind of picked 20. 20 was going to be the top at one point, and it was, just because you could draw a line on a log chart. There's not a chart you can find literally in history of any kind of large market cap that goes parabolic on a log chart that takes out the upward channel. And so that was a frenzy that, was fun to participate in. It necessarily wasn't horrible for the space because it dragged in energy and excitement. It wasn't great. And I don't think we're going to see it again. And so you'll see these little mini versions of excitement. That's not really the next chapter of this. The next chapter is actually building out product that works, is getting blockchains fast enough and dApps on top that are consumer, interfacing, that are easy to use. Institutions buying into those three buckets we talked about. The market for money, from Bitcoin to whatever stable coin or X coin there is, Web 3.0, and then this whole new world of digitalizing, old assets, art, non-fungible tokens,
all of that.
So there are three buckets. I think it's all happening. Takes longer than we all wanted to.
It's all right. It'll happen.
That's it.
What one regulation would you change or improve if you could?
I would wish. So we have an SEC who, in their DNA under the Trump administration, says we don't want to regulate a lot. We've already told you the rules. I don't think that's fair, because you've also got FINRA that's not approving lots of stuff, and I wish they would give a little more clarity.
So really just get the clarity on a whole bunch of stuff across crypto.
Yeah, because what's slowing growth down, right? The security token world isn't clear. And so, what's slowing growth down is that level of clarity, and they're just still waiting.
Yeah.
I do think they'll make some progress, but that would be if you could knock the regulators and say, hey, could you speed it up a little bit?
Well, and look, I've always said that tell entrepreneurs what the rules are, right? And give them confidence that those rules aren't going to get changed or kind of pulled out from underneath them, and they'll go figure out how to build businesses.
Listen, so the frenzy of the market allowed people to, go to this idea of, part of the theme of crypto was the democratization of finance. Why should Mike Novogratz be able to invest in a biotech firm or buy an expensive piece of art, but the man on the street can't? Well, okay, let's digitalize, let's fractionalize it and give him a chance. Well, I don't think at their core, regulators, the Republican administration in charge, doesn't think would be a good idea. Their job, though, was to protect the little guy. And the little guy got run over in that process. And there was fraud and there was hype, and even the whole ICO process, the way it worked. I got in early, and then you'd get your buddy's tokens, and then you'd raise tokens, and you'd hype it up, and you had these up downs. Like, that wasn't good for anybody. And so the regulators said, no. The little guy can't participate. And I think for the next few years, the little guy's not going to be able to participate in any of the security coin offerings. I don't think that's the long-term end. Yeah. I think once there is a sobriety and there are credentializers and there are underwriters in the system, we will see a crowdsourced distribution of assets that retail never had access to before. I do think that's the long-term end. I think we had a step back. The regulators like, no. So it's one step back for two steps forward.
Absolutely. What's your most controversial thought in crypto? Like, what's the one thing that you believe that you think most other people disagree with?
I think I'm not sure they disagree with it. I think in 5 years, you're going to literally disrupt the entire advertising business.
Oh, really? Explain that.
When you look at the ability to take, there's a company, Atomic, Eric Pullier's company, and he can create that jack, a digital version of it, or Coca-Cola's. And imagine flying your airplane over New York City, a real airplane, and dumping out virtual Cokes. And me and you with our phone, just like Pokemon Go, we're catching those Cokes, and we can now bring them in and convert them, and maybe it's a new Coke, a new flavor,
whatever it is. Yep.
And so we've just done this product launch by dumping a virtual good that's a unique object that when I shift it from my phone or from my blockchain to the store, it disappears from my phone. Or it could be they did an experiment with butterflies. They had a bunch of butterflies around. If you caught one of the butterflies, you could get $50 to your charity. Or it could be a beer that if I give that beer to 5 people, it actually fills up and I actually can turn it into for real beer. And so I think you're going to see gifting and advertising transformed when we have this grid out there where the two-dimensional world or the three-dimensional world and the virtual world kind of intersect.
Yeah. And China sees it. I mean, look, all over Asia, this stuff's happening, right? The red envelope and WeChat and all this stuff is happening.
And, the technology's there now. There's a bunch of companies working on it. Wax has a new company. They're going to literally take fancy tennis shoes and you can buy them and they're going to put them in a warehouse. You know how the people trade these tennis shoes all the time? It's a huge market of trading fancy Nikes. Well, right now I got to sell them to you and you got to sell them to them. What if we put them in a warehouse? Now we've got the digital form of them and we're just trading them around.
Yep. Just all of a sudden sit in a centralized database.
Yes. They're building databases to store tennis shoes.
Yep.
And other consumer goods. And so I think you're going to see that part of the world shift much faster than people think.
Yeah. What's the most important book you've ever read?
That's a good question. In the last few years, it was Sapiens. I think, Hariri is brilliant. This idea that humans are storytellers and that it's just a story is such a it's powerful on your individual journey. Like everything you think about, it's just a story. I don't like, it's a story. You can convince yourself to try any food if you just unwind the story.
Yep.
I was a picky eater growing up. Now I will literally eat anything. My last thing was uni. I don't like uni. I like all sushi but uni. Now I think uni is literally the best thing on the menu. And it was just a shift of mindset. And so he does that both on the individual, but he does it on the societal basis. And I thought that was pretty cool.
So before I finish up, I always let you ask me one question, but we have to talk about non-crypto stuff, which is aliens. Do you think that they're real? You think aliens exist?
If you go do ayahuasca and you'll certainly think so. Listen, is there other life force out there? There has to be. I don't think I've seen any other than in my mind, but just my mathematical instincts tell me, we're not the only people out there.
All right. And so most people think about space, aliens, all this stuff. As I've asked this question to everybody, it's got me to think more about the depths of the ocean, because we probably actually know less about the ocean than we do about space. Would you rather go to the depths of the ocean or to space? Like if you had to go to one, which one are you less afraid of going to?
It all depends on if we got the Star Trek speed. Sitting in a space capsule going through black for like 11 years to get somewhere, it doesn't interest me. But if I get that, if I go to the turbo or hyperspeed,
if you can just show up,
100% space. Okay. But I love the oceans as well. I do.
I just, the bottom of the ocean scares the hell out of me, I think. Like what's down there? We don't know. I don't know.
All kinds of freaky things.
Yeah, for sure. What one question do you have for me to finish it up?
That's a good question. So, who's been your most exciting guest you've had on this place?
The most exciting?
Or where you learned the most?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You're
going to piss off the other 90, I'm sure.
No,
pick me.
I'm going to throw 2 or 3 out there. One, 2 of them, the highest energy, like most fun ones, were Josh Brown and Reform Broker on Twitter, and Jim O'Shaughnessy. So both of them came in very different, kind of perspectives. Jim literally came in and said, I don't know anything about crypto, like 5 times, and said, okay, what do you want to talk about? And Josh just was being himself. And when I asked him the alien question, he out of nowhere said ghosts are more real than aliens, which
that's a strange answer.
To this day, I give him a hard time about. But those 2 guys were the most fun. I think the most impressive person was CZ, and it was really, again, just how he's built the company, scaled it so quickly, so many different countries. And then my favorite conversation was with Peter McCormick, who does the What Bitcoin Did podcast. He came on. We didn't talk about crypto at all. And so I just got to talk to him about his life, he's got kids and just kind of how he has built a career, lost a career, rebuilt a career. Now he focuses full time on this. And it reminds me a lot of like kind of your whole, you got to figure shit out. You got a journey in life and kind of what that journey looks like and the kind of heroics involved. That one was really cool to hear. And then you also said that you did 6 marathons in the Sahara Desert. And I'm sitting here thinking about what crazy shit I can go do to beat that.
I got a list for you. I'll give you afterwards.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I think people are really going to enjoy this. So we'll have to do it again sometime.
Awesome. Thank you.
Another word from our sponsors at Totle. They're kind of like Kayak, which helps you find the best flights. But Totle helps you find liquidity by aggregating decentralized exchanges and optimally routing trades for execution. Remember, that's totle.com/pomp. TOTLE.com/pomp. Go check it out. Let me know what you think. Tweet at me. I'll drop you some fire emojis. Totle.com/pomp. One more word from our sponsor, BlockFi. Their new interest account allows you to securely deposit your Bitcoin or Ether at BlockFi and receive 6% annual interest paid monthly in cryptocurrency. This rate actually compounds, so you receive a 6.2% APY, which is very attractive given the alternatives. So you can actually take your Bitcoin, you can deposit it with BlockFi, and get paid an interest rate of 6% in return. Go check out blockfi.com/pomp. Again, blockfi.com/pomp to sign up and start earning interest on your crypto today. As we all know, crypto makes tax season a headache. Ain't nobody like dealing with this stuff, so let ZenLedger do it for you. If you go to zenledger.io/offthechain, you'll get 20% off your 2018 tax forms. These guys have a fast and simple tax reporting tool that saves you time and money. That's right. When you listen to this podcast, you get smarter and richer. One more time for the people in the back, that's zenledger.io/offthechain. Go check them out and let me know what you think. Hey everyone, Pomp here. If you like this episode of Off the Chain and want to help us take crypto to the top of the Apple, Spotify, and other podcast charts, please do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe. To review, simply go to the Off the Chain homepage, scroll down until you see the 5 blank stars. Taking 15 seconds to fill those stars in and leave a quick review goes a long way in helping us take the entire crypto ecosystem to the top of the charts. I appreciate you listening and see you next time on Off the Chain.